Well, hi again, everybody. It's just now about 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our Church360 Ledger Complete Overview webinar. Our theme for today is going to be special events accounting during Advent and Christmas. So again, we're going to go through the software, we're going to go through all the components, but in that theme of Advent and Christmas, we know that different churches have different types of events coming up in the next few months, and we want to show you how to set up your Ledger account so you can track and manage all the funds that come in with that. Let me get my slides going here. Sorry about that. Oh. There we go. Here's my picture, my name, my phone number, and email address. If I go too fast during the webinar, or if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Just know that because of the holiday week this week, we are closed on Thursday and Friday, so my delay in getting back to you might be a little longer than possible or usual if you send me a message this week. But please, again, I'll have these up at the end of the webinar. Always feel free to get in touch with us. A little bit about our company. Concordia Technology Solutions is part of Concordia Publishing House. We're the church administration division. So along with Church360 Ledger, we have a variety of other products, including Church360 Members, which is our church management software, Church360 Unite, which is our church website builder software, and then we also have Shepherd Staff, which many of our prospective customers for Church360 are using now as well. A little bit about Concordia Publishing House for those of you who might not be familiar. Here's a picture of us at the 1904 World's Fair. We've been around quite a while, so as you can imagine, technology and chimes have changed since then, especially in terms of computers. Not too many computers in that 1904 World's Fair booth, but we here have been developing software for churches since 1984 with that Shepherd's Draft project. Program that I was alluding to earlier. Here's a picture of our Innovation Center. It's where a lot of our collaboration and work together takes place, where we come up with new ideas for you so you can manage your tax quickly and easily and really get to that main work of sharing the gospel with your churches. A quick outline of what we're going to go through today. We have 60 minutes for the presentation. I'll go through slides like this, just giving a very broad overview for about the first 15 minutes, and then the remaining 45 minutes we'll go through the software. And then after that first hour, we'll have 30 minutes for questions. Now with Ledger, usually we have a smaller audience, so we don't always take up the 30 minutes for questions. But you're always allowed to ask questions throughout. You can always ask questions using the question box, the chat box that should be built into your webinar software. So even if I don't answer your question right away, just know that by the end of the webinar, we'll definitely get to your question and be able to answer it. One more thing, as we mentioned in the intro emails, the recording from today will be shared. We know sometimes you have to hop in and out, or there might be somebody at your church who isn't able to listen in today. I'll send you that link to the recording hopefully by the end of the day today, and then you can forward that on to anybody at your church or in your congregation who you would like to watch this recording. A little bit more about Church360 Ledger. It's one component in a suite of components which we call Church360 Complete Church Management. So Ledger is the accounting portion of that software suite. Church360 Members is your member database. It also has some capabilities built in to track giving history and offerings. So if you do have Church360 Members and Ledger together, you're able to talk with those two programs together and get your member information right into your deposits and accounting systems. And then we have Church360 Unite, which is our church website builder software. Unlike many other accounting softwares, Church360 Ledger is truly focused on church finances. There were three main things we wanted to keep in mind when our developers were coming up with this software. First, we wanted to make sure it was intuitive, because not many church people are accountants. We know that. Oops. Ahead of myself. So we want you to be able to use the software even if you're not well versed in accounting. I know that I sure am not well versed in accounting, but I'm able to use the software and show it to you guys because of the way it was created and designed for everyday people. We also wanted it to be secure. Even though this is a cloud-based product, we have a bunch of security built in so that your church finances always remain confidential and safe, so that your members can rest easy and you can rest easy knowing that your information won't be compromised. We also meant for this software to be focused. There's a lot of accounting options out there, a lot of programs that can do a lot more versatile things maybe than our software, but our software is one of the few that is truly focused on churches and the types of accounts you're going to have. So we have a fund accounting system where you're able to track income and expenses by fund, which we'll get into a lot later today as we go through our example of Advent and Christmas events. So we just given you a brief overview. I'll get into the basics a little bit more. We'll go through a tour of the software and then questions and answers, as I said earlier. Because we know that talking about your church's finances can be difficult, whether you're the pastor that's giving that stewardship sermon, or you're a treasurer or accountant, or even a lay person who just wants to help out in the office. Nobody really likes to talk about money that much. But the more positive section of that is that we know that every dollar has been donated and every donation comes from the heart. And that's what sets your church apart. People who give to your church are really giving to the work of the gospel, to that good news of Jesus Christ. And we know when we track our finances, when we're financially accountable, that gives us joy in our service and gives us time and energy to free us up for those tasks of actually going out and spreading the word to our members and to those not in our churches. Again, stewardship is critical. We know that whether people are able to give a lot or a little, they want that that money to be used for the gospel. They don't want it to be used in extravagant ways or ways that are irresponsible. And so accountability is also critical. We want to make sure that the people tracking your church finances are doing things in the right way. So the software we're going to look through today, I'll show you a few examples where everybody's accountable, where every financial transaction is tracked, where you can see who is making changes, so that if someone would come into your church with ill intents, they aren't able to completely detriment the system. So what does accountability look like? There's kind of two aspects to this. So you want to prevent the ill intention from doing wrong. We know that unfortunately there are people out there who will prey on churches, so we want to be able to curb those type of people from coming to your church. But there's another aspect to that. You also want to prevent the well-intentioned from making mistakes. As I was saying earlier, we all make mistakes. We all know that people working in churches sometimes don't have as heavy of a financial background as people in other professions. So the software is built in with checks and balances so that if you do make a mistake, you're able to correct that and you're able to see when it was made and what was affected by that. So in a congregation, we know that you have a variety of different people working on your church finances. You have volunteer ministry treasurers, paid finance coordinators, elected church treasurers, and people on elected finance boards. So of those four different types of people, we kind of divided those up into two key personas. So you have the church treasurer, who might have been an experienced accountant who wants to oversee all aspects of your church, who cares about the details and relies heavily on that audit trail. So this type of person might be in your church. An accountant might be his day job. He might have used to be an accountant but retired now, but he definitely knows what he's doing and what he's looking for in a software. But we also know that that's not the only person probably working on your church finances. A lot of our churches just are full of willing volunteers who want to help in whatever way they can. So this person might be able to balance their checkbook. They might want to enter transactions. They care about the ministry and, again, don't want to make a mistake. So it's kind of hard when we were building this software. We wanted both these people to be able to be satisfied. And we really hope that the software will provide that for you, that it will provide the accountability and the flexibility and the ease so that no matter who's at your church working on the software, they're happy and they're able to do what they want when they want. Okay, so down to the nitty-gritty. We're almost there. So we're going to go through a real-life example today. I'm going to explore all areas of the software, and I hope at the end of this webinar, you can answer this question: how can I use Church360 Ledger to support my ministry? As I said, we're talking about special events during Advent and Christmas today, and we know that different churches have different types of Advent and Christmas events. But no matter what type of event you have, whether it's a live nativity or an Advent soup supper or Advent by candlelight, usually these aspects will be common to those events. So you'll have multiple income streams. You might have people donating specifically for that event. You might have allocation from your general fund moving over into that event to make sure you can pay for it. You might even have people giving through the offering plate every week who want to donate to that special Advent or Christmas event. And there's also multiple expense accounts. Today, our example we're going to go through if you had a live nativity at your church. So you'll see there's going to be expenses with that. Maybe you need supplies or tracts you're going to give away. Maybe you need money for costumes or for snacks and treats outside. We'll show you how to account for all those different types of expenses within a one category so that you're able to track just the success of that one event while looking at it in the broader scope of what's going on at your church throughout the year. Events like these always have a specific budget. Again, that goes back to our theme of stewardship. We want to make sure we're using our finances wisely, where we could use them better maybe next year, or where we have room to grow for next year. And we also know that at churches, different ministry leaders need access. So although you might have a treasurer or a financial secretary, maybe your children's ministry director might need to see her budget for the year, or the pastor might want to see how everybody's budget is doing. We'll show you how to give each of these ministry leaders different types of access so everybody's able to see what they want, when they want, and they're not allowed to see or edit transactions that don't really apply to their area. And again, all of these things require reporting, whether you're going to your church council afterwards or you're just assessing progress throughout. We'll show you which reports are available to you in Church360 Ledger. That being said, I know I went really fast and stumbled over my words a little bit, but it's because I want to get to the software so we have plenty of time in there. So I'm going to switch my screen over. I might have a few more errors like I did up at the start, but hopefully not too many. Okay, here we go. So this is the main sign-on screen for Church360 Ledger. You'll see it'll ask me to sign up or sign on. This up here will be a URL. Whether you're a current customer or you sign up for the trial, you'll get a specific subdomain that you'll enter into the highlighted portion that I'm showing you right there. And then you'll have email and passwords that are specific to you. So this is my training email and password. We'll just sign in here. And while we're waiting for the software to load, we're just going to go over the home screen really quickly right now, but I'll show you more in depth at the end of the webinar, all the things you can do on the home screen. So the home screen is divided into 3 or 4 main parts. So you have your main toolbar up here where you're able to switch your books. Now I only have one book. It has some main functions. This is your pending transactions, your reports, your setting, and this will be your profile here. This is your transaction bar. This transaction bar is available no matter what screen you're on. So no matter what you're doing, you're always able to create transactions if you need to. We have these graphs in the mid portion of your screen here. This is your current running balance graph. So that's the total of all your assets, liability, income, and expenses. And then those 4 categories are divided up here. Each of these mini graphs is drillable, so you're able to click down to find whatever you want to find. You can always access the home screen from any screen by clicking up here and clicking on the Ledger logo, and it'll take you back to the home screen. And then here's your transactions bar where you see the history of all your transactions throughout time. One more important thing here on the home screen is your date selector. So what appears in the transaction bar down here is dependent on what you have selected in your date selector. So you can go by quarter, quarter 3 or quarter 4. You can go by month, or like I had it here, you can actually go by the entire year. These are your fiscal years set up here. I have 2 fiscal years for 2016, which I was trying out, but you can always change this. So if I wanted to go back to January 1st of 2016 to December 31st of 2016, you can always change that, and then you'll see that your transaction screen will go all the way back. It's an infinite scroll down here to whatever date you want it to. So when you first go into Church360 Ledger, the first thing you'll probably want to do is set up a book, and a book is just a way of organizing your finances. Depending on your church structure, we found that most churches that work with us just have one book, and that's the church book. But some churches do have a separate book for their preschool or their school. So to create a new book, you'll just go up here to the settings cog, and then you'll go all the way down to books right here. And it'll give you a listing of your books. Now, if you had a ton of books, which we don't recommend, you'd be able to search for them and filter them here. If you want to add a new book, you just click on this Add a New One button. And let's say we're just making a book for the school. With any book you select your starting month for your fiscal year. This is just the starting month for your first fiscal year. So if you decide later that you want to switch from January to July fiscal years, you can do that in a different screen, and I'll show you that today. We'll just go with January fiscal year, and then the start date, which is the beginning of your book activity. So if you're sitting here like we are today and it's October or November of 2016, but your fiscal year started in January, I recommend starting your book date to be earlier so that if you have any back transactions to enter, you can do that. Once all this information is set, you can just click the Submit button. It'll let you know the book was created, and then your book is listed down here. You can make changes if you haven't made transactions on your book already, and you can always delete a book as well. You can just click on this minus sign. It'll ask you if you want to delete. And then to access your different books, again, you just go up here to your toolbar, and then you would select which book you're going to be working in for the day. But today we'll stay in the church book because that'll be our main example. Just know that that books option is there when you want it to be there. After you have your first book set up, the next thing you'll want to do is set up your chart of accounts. So to do that, you'll click on your settings cog again and click on this first item, which is chart of accounts. And you'll see I already have part of my chart of accounts set up here. One thing that I'd really emphasize for churches that are just starting, I know it's a temptation that you want to start just putting your transactions in right away. However, the most important thing you'll want to do is have your chart of accounts set up, because if you don't do that, it's going to be really hard to backtrack and add accounts or delete accounts or move money amongst accounts. So setting up your chart of accounts is really important. Now you'll see there's 4 different account types within the chart of accounts, and this is basic accounting principles. If you're ever confused about this, which I often am, I'll confess, you can always click on this information, and in one of these help articles, I believe it's how do I add an account. Oh, I am wrong. We'll go over here. There's a help article in our help system that tells you about chart of accounts and how those work. So if you're not used to using chart of accounts, you know exactly what type of account to add. But just for today's purposes, asset accounts are items your congregation owns. So these are kind of the big things, or your bank accounts. So you can see we have our checking account and our savings account listed under assets here. Now within those asset accounts, you can have funds, you can have restricted funds, which are funds designated for a certain purpose. So you'll see in our checking account for our fictional church here, we have our unrestricted account, which is just our main checking account. But then we have all these other sub-accounts within our main checking account to let us know how our money's being spent. If you want to add a restricted fund to any of your accounts, all you have to do is click on this new restricted fund icon, and then you'll type in the name of your account. So I'll just add an outreach asset fund account. And it's simple as clicking on that button and typing it in, and then I'll click submit. And you can see that my outreach fund was added as a sub-account under my assets here. One more thing to be aware of, if you add something in the wrong place, that's no worries. You can always click on this reset button. The only thing that locks your chart of accounts in place is clicking save changes. So if you're playing around in here, you wanted to see how your chart of accounts looked, you can always play with it and click reset, and then once you're really ready to go, click on save changes. One more thing to be aware of, and this is true of assets, liabilities, incomes, or expenses, you can create categories. So you can see these are larger categories here, and the advantage of creating a category is that all the funds underneath this category roll up into the total. So you can see the total of all these funds plus your unrestricted account will be calculated up here in this $114,000. The next section in your chart of accounts here is your liabilities, and these are items that track your congregation's debt. So many people divide this up into short-term and long-term liabilities. So any payroll deductions, tax deductions, health insurance, things like that that you know are coming but you don't pay frequently can roll up into liabilities. And then we have our income and expense accounts. And I'll show a few examples here, especially if we're going through our Advent and Christmas example. So like I said earlier, we're going to go through this as if we were setting up a live nativity and wanted to track that with our different funds. So first of all, we need to set up the income accounts, and then what we'll do is we'll set up parallel expense accounts so that when you're creating your transactions, you know where the money's going into and where it's going out of, and you don't have to guess which way you set it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a category here. So I'll just click on New Category, and we'll name this category Events, because right now our fictional church doesn't have any events, but we know that throughout the year there'll be different events that will fall into that category. The cool thing about Ledger is that you can also create a category within a category. So if you wanted to have an events category and then you wanted to have, say, a live nativity category within that, you could just set that up. And you could even add the year for this. So say we wanted our live nativity 2016 category. We could do that. I'll just keep it generic for now in case we want to watch those funds roll over throughout the year. And then what you can do is you can use the built-in indentations to help you organize. So since Live Nativity is really a subcategory of the larger events category, I was able to move it over. Now that we have our two categories set up, I'll set up some new accounts. So as I was saying earlier, I might have an account for food to track income of people who want to give food. You can set up an account number here, and then an initial balance. We'll set that balance to $0. And then after it's created, again, you can use this indentation feature so you know exactly how things are organized. I'll just do this again so you guys can watch a couple times. So if you had costumes you wanted to track income for, say somebody donated supplies for costumes or donated money for making costumes, you could track it here. Decorations, so if somebody was making a stable or if you were having animals come in, I know that my church is doing that, you can fill that in. One cool thing I just ran across that I forgot to say, if you forget to set an initial balance, Church360 Ledger will let you know. So you can never forget to do something and the software does not tell you. It always tells you what you forget. And then you can just move this over here. And then our last category for income will be giveaways. So I was thinking, especially during Christmas, you might have some giveaways, some promotional materials, inviting your members to come to Christmas Eve or Christmas Day worship. Or you might even order some books or some tracts that you're giving away that share that gospel message of Jesus coming to earth. So I'll indent this one more time. You can see we have our income account set up. And then I'll go to our expenses account. So expenses are things you would write checks for, and you can see we have a lot of different expense accounts set up. And one thing I've already done for this church is that I've already set up an events category and a fall festival category. You can see we have a few events here, and I actually, when I was setting this one up, I think I forgot to indent all these things. So again, you can go back and change these things as much as you want if you forget something later. I'm going to add another subcategory to events here. Again, we'll just call it Live Nativity Expenses. And I'll call it expenses so I don't get messed up when I'm entering transactions later. I'll indent this, and then we'll add those same 4 accounts. This time, though, it'll be to track our expenses for Live Nativity. So food, and again, same deal here with adding that initial balance. So I can do all of these at once. Costumes. And if we did have initial balance, say you were coming over from a different software, you can always enter that in. So I'll just enter $150 there, and then we'll have giveaways. Thanks guys for being patient with me, and then you can just indent all of these how you want them to be. Sorry. Okay, almost there. And then you can see that because I added the $150 under decorations, it rolled up into my live nativity expenses, and then that is also going to roll up into my overall events category for expenses. So you can see for my last event I had 175 plus 150. That's where we're getting the 325 from. I'm pretty happy with this for now. I know there's a lot more things I could be doing, but for today's purposes, our chart of accounts is all set. Again, make sure you save changes. In this nice confirmation box does appear so that if you have questions or you forgot all that you did, you can confirm those before it actually saves. Again, here's another chance. If you realize when you see this you created way too many things or you had more work to do, you can always discard your changes and start over. You can cancel and go back to your main screen, or just confirm, which we'll do today. There's also this message that lets you know that you're going to be logged out of Ledger. That's a security feature we have. So if you're not in Ledger for that long or you step away from your computer, the software automatically times you out. So that nobody can get in there, that's not supposed to be. But since we're doing our webinar today, we definitely want to stay logged in. One more thing I'll let you guys know of. It says, let you know when the chart of accounts was updated. Any action you perform in Ledger will give you this confirmation message here. That's just to let you know you're doing things right, that you didn't mess things up too bad, or it's also a good way to let you know if you thought you saved, but you didn't. Okay, with our chart of accounts in hand, the next thing I want to do is go through our budgets. So to go to budgets, to set up your budgets, you'll click on this chart of accounts icon, our settings gear, and then click on the budgets icon. Okay, so a few important things to be aware of in budgets. You can see I had my fiscal years are all in options here, and the fiscal years that appear are dependent on how you have your fiscal years set up. Now I had two set up for 2016 because I shift halfway through, and then it'll August give you your next fiscal year. So if your church is still planning for next year's events, you can begin to budget before that fiscal year actually starts, which I think most churches do on a regular basis. The start date for your fiscal year is dependent on your settings and fiscal years. Let me just show you that very quickly. You can access that by going into fiscal years, and you can see it lets you select the starting month of your next fiscal year. It'll give you the history of your fiscal years, and then this button will let you know if that fiscal year is locked or not. Any fiscal years that are locked, you can't add transactions to. But let's go back to budgets. And we're going to go down. You can see we have our income and expenses, and here's our live nativity category. Again, we have our categories and accounts showing in our budget screen. The categories are this darker gray color, and then your accounts are the light gray color. If you have multiple categories, you can see that your indentation holds, and then everything will roll up. So if you are budgeting to have $100 come in for each of these categories, you have a couple of ways to record that. If you record it in this total column here, the money splits evenly between all the remaining months of the year. So because I have 3 remaining months in this fiscal year, it's splitting it up 3 ways. You can see it added the extra cent there. However, we know that with a lot of events that are especially time-based, you might be only budgeting to have income or expenses on 1 month out of the year, and that's fine. You can set that up in budgets too. So just select whatever month you're expecting to have your income come in. So for a live nativity, you might expect to have maybe $75 come in November and $125 come in December. I added an extra 0 here. You can see that when you add the accounts 1 month at a time, it automatically totals them in the total column. So this is one thing. Another thing I love about Ledger is that you don't need your calculator beside you. Ledger will make all those calculations for you. I'm going to keep doing this same philosophy in my remaining months of the year, just because I know that something like a live nativity or a special event, we had trunk or treat here at Fall Festival, is very time-based. But just know that if you're a treasurer or accountant and you have that one total for the whole year and you don't want to go in and enter it each month, you always do have that option too. So we'll just enter our totals in here, and we'll keep going. Now the budget screen is very similar to the chart of accounts screen in that there is this save button at the bottom. So make sure when you're entering your budgets, you always are able to save your changes. And again, it lets me know my budgets are updated. Now that I added my income, that's one way you can do it, but we know that a lot of churches do use Excel and then take their Excel file that they might have used at the church council meeting and use that over in Ledger. So we have a few ways you can use this budget screen, especially with Excel, and these are fairly new developments that our developers have made in the last few months. If you want to either edit your budgets in Excel or you want to import from Excel, the first thing you'll want to do is select your fiscal year and then click on this Export to Excel icon. You can see that my file downloaded automatically, and I just have to click on it to open it up. Hopefully you guys will give me a few minutes while Excel is opening. I'm going to enable editing. So this is what the Excel export looks like when it comes out. Those hashtags there just meant that my column wasn't wide enough. So this is exactly how you set it up. Again, the categories are in bold. It carries over the same indentation. And what you can do, I'm going to go down to our live nativity expenses. So here's our totals column, and then here's our remaining 3 months column. If I wanted to put in my totals for here, so say I wanted to just do 50, say I was expecting $50 in expenses at this time. You can see that this is summing everything under it. That's how we set it up with the categories. Now that totals column doesn't total in Excel the way it would in Ledger itself, because again, we can't know beforehand if you want to split that total among 12 months or among 3. That's why for some churches it's easier just to edit in Ledger, but we'll keep this for our example now. Once I have this ready, I can select the cells I want to copy back into Ledger. I can click copy, and then let me go all the way down here. I'm going to go all the way down to my expenses, and fingers crossed, just kidding, it'll split over. Now because again I was moving it from Ledger totals column, it automatically divided these when I got back into Ledger. That's okay, I can always edit it back if I need to. So this is the one thing, another thing I like about Ledger is the flexibility. If you do something and then you find out it's not what you wanted to do or not what you meant to do, you can always go back and edit, especially if you haven't saved your changes yet. Again, at the bottom here, you have your reset option or your save changes option when you're done. Another nice thing here, I don't have previous year's budgets and actuals entered in because these are new categories for us. But if when you're setting your budget, you wanted to compare to the previous year's budget or the previous year's actuals, these numbers in this kind of aqua color will automatically populate down here so you can see what you're doing. I'm going to save changes. It'll let me know my budgets were updated. Again, I can close out of this without any worries. Now that we have our budgets, our fiscal years, our chart of accounts set up, we are going to get into, some of our other settings here. One thing I didn't show you at the start, which I'll show you now, is your general settings. So these are just general things about your church. So you can edit your church name in Ledger. So depending what your church is, you can always change that. If you merge with another church, you can always add that in. Your customer number is something that appears automatically. It's our internal number here so that if you do call in with a support question or you send the support team a message down here, they know exactly what your church is and they can find your information. Your check style, we work with a company called Forms Plus, and the software is compatible with that, so you can either have a top or a middle check style, and we'll get into that later with printing checks. If you have two signature checks, so say your church president and the pastor need to sign everything, you can select that here. And then your church address and phone. So if you set up your account with one address and phone and then your church moves or you get a different phone service, just know you can always change that in here. And again, same thing with the save button. We're going to talk about recurring and imported transactions a little bit later. But the next thing I want to talk about is users and roles. And users and roles goes back to the idea I was discussing earlier about accountability. These users and roles are ways that you can give people different access to different parts of the software and make sure they're all doing things right. So each account you need to have one administrator, and that's kind of your end-all be-all person at your church. So if you do have a paid financial manager, it could be that one. If you're a smaller church, you might want to have the pastor be your administrator. That's up to you, but the administrator role applies to all your books, and they can basically do anything. Now, that's not to say that the administrator can get away with anything. Even the administrator role, all their transactions will be logged in our event log here. So you can see even someone who's an administrator on an account like me, every single thing they do is tracked in the event log. So you can see since we've started here, it tracked all these accounts and funds I did. It also tracked any transactions that I put in. And that's, again, just to hold you accountable and your members accountable, that no matter who's the administrator, no matter who might have a lesser role in your congregation, everybody is tracked equally, and you can track changes back to anyone. Now you can see we already have quite a few roles in here, but I want to just show you how to add a couple. So if we're going with our live nativity example, maybe you have a live nativity director or an outreach director. That's probably more likely. So you'll enter your role name here, and you can change this as much as you want. And then where it says this role applies to, you select which books. So you can select one book, you can select all your books, or you can select only certain books. And then under management here, you can select whether they can manage your chart of accounts, which means they can add and edit accounts. They can view all accounts, or can only view a subset of accounts. Now our outreach director, I'll show you how you can set it so they can view a subset of accounts. And then in this transactions roles down here, you can select which type of transactions this person can make. So if you want them to be able to make deposits and print checks but not create checks, you can do that. You might not want them to make journal entries because that's definitely a more high-level accounting principle. Customize this to your heart's content. Once I hit submit, you can see a subset of accounts. Now I have to go back in here to put can view selected accounts, and then I have all my accounts listed here, and I'll select that they can view the outreach fund, no liabilities, live nativity, and our income, and then live nativity and our expenses. This screen auto saves. It'll let you know what accounts are accessible, and then you can just click this X button, and then once you go back, hopefully you guys can see this. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. You can see can view selected accounts. And the good thing is if roles change, if you start with these settings and then you want to give your outreach director or anybody more permissions, you can always change that later on. So let me go to one of my other roles. Here's a role I've made already. If I just wanted my treasurer to view accounts but not manage chart of accounts, I can go back and edit that as I see fit. And it always lets you know once your role is updated. Once you have all your roles set, the next thing you'll want to do is invite people to use those roles. In your list of users this year, you can see here I am as administrator. These are just two fictional people that we had added into our test account here. And we'll add a third one. So we'll say this lady's name is Kira Belton. All you have to do is know the person's email and then select which roles they have. So if Kira was the outreach director at your church, you could put that. If she was both outreach and children's ministry, you select that. So you can mix and match roles depending on what your church has and needs in terms of visibility and accountability. Once you've selected the roles, you can just click submit, and the person will get a notification to join Ledger via email, and then they'll use that same basic URL with the subdomain that you use to log in when you're using the software. A few more things in settings here. We have payees, which are, I think the easiest way I can explain it is people your church writes checks to or makes payments to. So you can see all my payees here. Since we're a CPH, I often use them as an example. That's why we have so many here. And with any payee, you can click on them and see your history with them. You can see our account hasn't paid the Department of the Treasury, but you can see, I know we have some under your internet bill, so you can see where the money was coming from. You can see money was coming out of our unrestricted fund and used for our internet fund. And you can again change the dates. You can print from any screen or you can export these to Excel. You can always add a new payee too. It's just as simple as clicking add a new one. You'll put your name, your address, and then any notes about the payee. So if the payee was used for something obscure, you can always add that in there as well. Let me just check my time quickly. We have about 20 minutes left in our first hour, so let me get onto transactions quickly because I know people are always wondering about different types of transactions. There's 5 main transaction types in Ledger, and I'll go through each one of them one at a time. They each have a few nuances, but then a few concepts that carry over. The biggest thing to know, I think, is the difference between payments and checks. So a check is something you would write out a physical check for, whether you're printing it from your computer or writing it by hand. And a payment is a way to record electronic payments. So if you pay some of your bills electronically and some of your bills by written check, that's how you differentiate when to use these two. Deposit is pretty straightforward. Transfer is just transferring money between any of your accounts. So we'll show in a minute if you wanted to transfer money from your general fund to your outreach fund, you're able to do that. And then the final transaction type is journal entry. Again, we recommend only using the journal entry if you're an experienced accountant, again, because some of the automatic calculations that take place with these top 4 aren't really available in journal entry. So for someone who knows what they're doing, that's great. But for someone that, like me, who needs a little bit of help, I just get confused when using journal entries. So first transaction type is transfer. With any of your payments, you can always, you can always write a memo. So if I wanted to say allocation from general fund, I could say that. You can select a date, you can select today's date, or you can go any date in the past. So say this happened November 1st. And then you just select where your money's coming from and then where it's going to. So I'll select my outreach fund here. You can see that the debits and credits automatically calculate below. If you're not familiar with debits and credits, that's no worries. That's why we do the calculations for you. If for some reason, say, I forgot to add an extra 0, there's a few clues in Ledger to let me know, hey, Anna, I think you did the wrong thing right here. The first is that any remaining amount will appear in a second line on the bottom. If I wanted to save this, I get this red message here, and it says transaction could not be created because your line items have to equal to 0. So if I discovered my error, you can see that $90 goes away, everything is set. If I wanted to make this recurring, so say I wanted to allocate every month $100 from my general fund to the outreach fund, I can definitely do that. But in this example, we just want to click save. It'll let you know the transaction was created. And then if you want to be really sure, which sometimes I know I have to check myself, you can go over here to today's date, and it should, if I refresh, it'll show our transfer in here. and that was on November 1st. So you can see our allocation from general fund was here, and then this is our debits and credits. It'll show how it affected our running balance. So you can see that our outreach fund gained $100, but our unrestricted fund lost $100. Okay, next transaction type is deposit. Again, same deal here with the memo. The payee field for this is optional. Some people want to track deposits coming from certain sources. Again, though you're not paying them a check, it's just a way to track transactions between you and one of your ministry partners. And then you'll select their asset account and your income account. One thing I want to show here is that if you have Church360 members, there's another way to record your deposits, and that's up here. This is your pending transactions bar. So any transactions you've made, especially offering donations, is the example I like to give, automatically from members, here's our members logo, come into Church360 Ledger. So you can just click on that, and then you can add a memo as you wish. So if I want to say this is offerings for, what was this past weekend? We'll say November 19th and 20th. You can select a date for your deposit. So if it came over on the 22nd, but I knew I deposited on the 21st, again, payee. And then for your asset, you'll select your checking account. And then you can see that on this screen, since it's coming from members, there's a matching process that takes place. These are all the totals of all my offerings given in members to each fund. This is the name of the fund in Church360 members, and then this is the name of the fund I've set up here in Ledger. So you can see for the most part I did a good job of making my funds match between Ledger and members, but in the cases where I didn't make those match, it lets you select which fund you want to use. So if for social concerns and members, I know it's called the social fund in Ledger, all I have to do is click on that and it'll automatically match it for me. The nice thing is that since I've already brought offerings from members over more than once in my Ledger account, it automatically remembers everything you match, so you don't have to think about it every time. Again, debits and credits are calculated down here, and you can see the total here. You can click Save. It'll let you know the transaction was created, and then you can see that our offerings are recorded right here. Okay, next we'll do payments. Again, payments are ways to record electronic payments you've made. So, say for your live nativity event you wanted to give a Christmas book giveaway. You'll record the date the payment took place. So I'll go back to November 15th, and you'll record who you made the payee to. So we'll go Concordia Publishing House. Looks like I deactivated them. That's okay. And then you select which asset, a liability, and expense account it's coming from. So we want our outreach fund, $50, and then we wanted to expense it to, I'll just scroll down here through a while. Live nativity giveaways. There we go. And I click Save. Oh. Just taking a couple minutes there. But it will save just as you would any. There we go. Transaction was created. And then if we go back down here to CPH, you can see our Christmas book giveaway right here. Now, if you were writing a check, it's a very similar process. So you go New Transaction, Check. Say we were buying hot cocoa. Okay. Then you'd select the date your check was written. We'll make that today. You'll say you paid your check to the grocery store. There you go. In the same process here, we'll have this one coming out of the checking account. Say it costs $25 for hot cocoa, and then you wanted to charge that to your food expense for live nativity. You can see that the main account title is listed in the bold print, but then the categories are listed up here in the small print. You can then click Save. If I wanted this to be recurring, let me show you that really quickly. You'll just click on this recurring button. You'll select the name of your transaction and then the frequency. So you can select by month, date, and year. Then we click Save. With checks, another big difference is that when you select to create a check, it goes directly to your print queue. You'll get this message here, and you can access your print queue right here. Now, if you're doing a lot of checks at once, you don't have to go to the print queue every time. All your checks will be listed here. And then from within the print queue, you have two options. You can either actually physically print it, so if you have those Forms Plus forms, you can print them, or you can just mark it as printed. So if you wanted to record checks in Ledger, but then you wrote each check out by hand, all you would do is mark as printed, and it'll let you know, and then click confirm, and then you can see it disappears from your print queue. You can also access the print queue at any time by clicking on this printer button up here. If I had transactions, it would show them here. One more item is your journal entry. Again, this is a lot less formal than the other transaction types you had in that you don't have this automatic debit and credit box up here. You only have the debits and credits, which you can manually account for here. That's a good feature to have, especially if you're more experienced and you want to make a lot of journal entries. Journal entries are usually used for things like interest or non-regular expenses or payments or income. Okay, a couple other things, and to do this we're going to go back to our main screen. So say you went through, you entered all these transactions, and then you said, oh my gosh, I made an error. I wrote this check out. Actually, we'll go to our payments. I made this payment, but I didn't account for shipping. I didn't know what that would be. You can edit any transactions, either checks that have not been printed or payments that have not been reconciled yet. If it was reconciled, there'd be a lock button like this that would appear here. But good news, we haven't reconciled these yet. So to edit a transaction, you can just click on the transaction name wherever you are, and then you can make whatever adjustments you need to. So say that that $50 book was actually $54.99. Once you added its shipping, you can add that. And then you can add a memo. So if I just said forgot to calculate shipping, you can do that. And then you can save your transaction. And Ledger automatically creates a journal entry for you. So again, you don't lose that audit trail. You can see right here, this changed to $54.99, and it also has a note to let you know your transaction has been edited. You can also track that if you go to your general ledger right here. Look, there we go. And you can see my amendment memo will be somewhere down here. I have to get to the right day. Here we go. Here's our correction. Forgot to calculate shipping. And again, this is an easy way to edit transactions. If you don't know a lot about journal entries, Ledger will make those calculations for you and make sure everything stands in the right place. And you have an audit trail. So if an auditor is wondering why that correction was made, they can look at it right here and say, oh, they just forgot to put in shipping. A couple other things you can do with transactions in the main screen. You can copy transactions. So say you bought your hot cocoa for the live nativity and you got back to church and they were like, oh my gosh, that's not enough hot cocoa. We need to buy more. You can easily change that and copy that transaction. So you just click on the name. If you were editing it, you'd follow the same process I just did, but you also have this option to copy it. So once you click on copy, it says you're creating a copy of the check. You can change the date on the copy without affecting the original, and you can also change the amount. So say I went back and I bought twice as much as I did the first time. I'll click Save. And then you can see that now I have two transactions for hot cocoa for live nativity. This one is unprinted, and I can just access that the same process I did before. Going to my print queue, I'll mark it as printed just so it's off my plate. The final thing you can do from this main screen is that you can void a transaction. So let's say I wanted to void this first transaction to the grocery store. You can click on it, and then you click this red void button, and it'll let you know the transaction was voided, and then you can see there's this no symbol that appears. If you hover, it lets you know what date it was voided. It'll turn light gray, all the text compared to all your other transactions in the main view. And then again, if you go over to your general ledger, just gives me a minute to load here, it'll show red right here to let you know that transaction has been voided. Since we're already working on the main screen, there's just a couple more things we wanted to show you, and then we're almost out of time here. Here is what I was alluding to earlier. This is your reconcile transaction. One thing to really be aware of is that once a transaction is reconciled, it can't be edited. So if I try and go back here and edit, you'll see that this is all grayed out. It won't let me edit anything that's been reconciled. Again, that's for your protection and safety. Speaking of reconciliation, we recommend that you reconcile every month. Reconciling is just making sure that your chart of accounts matches your bank statement. So to do that, you'll just go to your home screen right here, click on your assets account, and then select which asset account you want to reconcile. And then once you click through once more, you can click on this green reconcile button. And the easiest way I find to reconcile is just to enter your statement date. You can change this. Now, it won't let me do too far in the past. If I go too far in the past, here, let me go here. You can see it says no transaction history because I've already reconciled up to that point. So you can't ever accidentally double reconcile a transaction. Once it's reconciled, it disappears from the screen you're on. So if I go back to today, though, the easiest way I find to reconcile is just to have your bank statement with you, enter the starting balance and the ending balance on your bank statement, and then go through each of the transactions in the period you're wanting to reconcile for and check them off. Now, if we had a bank statement for this account, I keep checking them off until I had everything checked off. If you've done it right, this off by number will say 0, and your statement difference and selected difference will all be 0. So you know you did it right. It won't let you save your reconciliation if it's not matching, which is again another protection for you. Or if you think you know what you're doing, but you need to go back and look at a bank statement, that's fine. You can always get out of this reconciliation screen by selecting cancel. And again, I'm just going to show you one more time. Once you click through these mini graphs, you can go to the final endpoint. It'll have a big graph for you. And then the transactions listed from within this mini graphs click through are only those allocated to a certain fund. There's also another way to get to that if you don't want to do all that clicking, and that's by going to the home screen. You can click on any of these payees or transaction types to filter down. So if I wanted to get to first grocery store from your home screen, you can do that. Just click on their name. You can see all the transactions attributed to them throughout time and throughout your events. You can also go by account. So if I wanted to see everything associated with my outreach fund, again, here's that large graph, and you can see your running balance. Now, I did a lot of transactions in there today, so you can see we're $5 under. I'll go fix that later. We're getting almost to the end here. We have about 2 minutes. I might go a little bit over, sorry guys, but I want to make sure I show you guys all 4 reports. So we have 4 main reports in Church360 Ledger. I've already gone through the general ledger report a couple times. We'll give it that minute to load. This is really your running book of all your transactions, including your journal entries. There's a few cool things you can do from your general ledger report besides exporting, printing, changing the date. That's the same everywhere. You can filter by transaction type. So if I just wanted to see journal entries recorded, for example, I could do that here. You can see I made some fake journal entries over here, or you can go back to selecting all. You can select certain payees. So say you wanted just the gas company, you could select them, or if you have all payees selected, you can group by payees. And once I do that, Just give my computer a moment to catch up. Let me scroll down. There we go. So you can see the payee name is listed in big bold letters here, and then all the payees by that person are grouped in one place. So again, this would be really fun to do if you had to export to Excel. You could export your group by payees. To ungroup, you'll just click this ungroup button. You can also group by accounts. Same principle here. I'll just give my computer a minute to catch up. So you have your building fund, all your building funds here, or you can filter by a fund. Next report we have to go through is your income and expense report. This lists just your income and expenses, and this is really the report you want to use if you're matching your budgets versus actuals for your current time period. So you see your budgets, your actuals, the percent of budget, and whatever is remaining here. So you can see when you're on your income, it's a good thing if you're on your red because it means you achieved more, you brought in more income than you had budgeted. But however, on your expenses, if you're in the red, that means you've spent too much, more than you've budgeted so far. You can expand and collapse these, so if you just wanted to see an overall financial picture, you could do that there, and then you can expand them again. You can just collapse by category here as well. It's meant to be flexible because we know certain times in your ministry you need more granular details, and sometimes you just need the big picture. Your chart of accounts report has all your assets and liabilities. Same principle where you can expand and collapse things. The top categories here, you have your starting at balance, ending, debits, credits, and then dollar change and percent change. So this is just looking at assets and liabilities. And again, it doesn't factor your budget into the equation. And then the last report here we have is your balance sheet. So this is your assets less your liabilities. Same type of principle with assets less liabilities, percent change, and dollar change here. I think that's it for now. So I'm going to go back to my slides since it's just after 2 o'clock. If you guys have any questions, now is a great time to start typing them because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. So let me get my PowerPoint going here. If you haven't already, we know that in these webinars, sometimes we have prospective customers, sometimes we have current customers. If you are not yet a current customer and you just want to try Ledger out, you can go to 360ledger.com and start your free 37-day trial. It's 37 days because if you want to test out that reconciliation process and you're waiting for your bank statement or waiting for certain bills to come through, we know that you might need those extra 7 days other than a regular month. So please go over there. It'll just ask your name and your email, and then you'll get sent a subdomain. A few important bits of contact information to keep in mind here. There again is my email and my phone number. Again, don't hesitate to email or call me. I'll try and return it as soon as possible. We also have your sales team on here if you're a prospective customer. Another important number that I don't have listed on there is our support team. So if you are a current customer and you have a more in-depth question, I can't always answer the super in-depth questions, I might direct you to the support team. Now, there is a way in-app to contact them. You just click send us a message. You can send them an email. You don't even have to put your name. They'll know who you are because you've logged in already. And also you can find this support email right here in case you ever want to call them. They can get into the particulars with you. If you think you've made a mistake you can't undo, they can also try and work with you about that. So they're another very important person to contact. Now that's it. I'm going to check just one more time for questions. I don't see any right now, so I think we'll sign off early. I just want to thank you guys for all attending. And again, I'll send you any information after the webinar with the recording. Have a happy day, guys, and have a blessed Thanksgiving.